And okay, so welcome back to
13-speed customs.
13-speed customs. Wow, I forget where I even was. Yeah, right. So today what we're going to be working on is an ABS issue in a 2012 384. So if you don't know what a 384 is, it's a 386 with a little bit of a shorter hood. They're actually pretty cool little trucks. Anyhow, this truck has an ABS issue where the ABS light is on for the truck, and when we run the fault codes on it, it comes up to left brake valve module shorted to power. So in what we've done so far before is we've checked out the module, actually replaced the module, still get the same code. So I contacted Bendix itself, gave them the code, and they gave me procedures for troubleshooting. And they're like, okay, it could either be an ABS module issue or a wiring issue. So to test that, they said to get yourself a multimeter. So here's my old multimeter, my old trusty, like literally 35-year-old multimeter. It still works. It's a great little multimeter. You don't need anything too fancy. Regular leads. We're going to switch it over to ohms here. And as you see on the multimeter, where it says OL, so when I go through the pin tests on this, if I get anything other than OL, that tells me that there's a wiring harness issue. Otherwise, they should all go to OL, which is ohms. It should not have any power. So let's go ahead and we'll get the proper pins. So there's two, if you look at them, there's two different sets of pins. Sometimes they're black and blue, sometimes they're black and gray. If you notice, the red lights just came on because we turned the battery power back on. So we're going to be looking at slot 2, which is actually the gray slot. The black slot is for the back. So what you do is you can put this pin on any one. However, these three right here are for the left front. Pin number 2 is what's called the release. So that tells you that if with the release, when that's activated, it will not allow the brake modulator to put air to that particular wheel. So in a hard, or not to release the air pressure from that in a hard braking situation. So let me clear that up a little bit. When you get into an emergency braking situation, you depress the pedal all the way, the brakes lock up. As soon as the wheel speed sensor detects the wheel's locked up, it'll send a signal down this wire to tell it, oh, release, to work as in the analog braking pattern. If you have a fault in this side and this signal does not get through, it will not tell it to release, and you'll get a skid situation on one wheel. So when you get these kinds of issues, you need to take care of them, because though you can drive the truck, there are safety concerns, because you can get into, especially in a steer axle, you can get into a skid situation in an emergency stop, and it can give you enough pull to turn you into either another vehicle, a center divider, off the road, whatever. So always, when you get an ABS code, find out what it is. Don't ignore it. Get it repaired, because it's a safety issue. So here we go. If you watch the ohm meter as you do the pins, if it changes, you know that it's got an issue in the circuit. So that's 0.06. There's an issue there. 0.32. There's an issue there. That one's OL. That one's OL. That one's OL. So this one is actually the next row over right here. Is this row is actually the right one. So those all come up as good. And then these back here are for the back of the truck, for the drive axles and the trailer. And as you can see, that never changes. That one's OL. That one's OL. And so then you come back to here, see if you can repeat the issue. 3.1 again there. 0.06 there. There's an issue. So now we're going to check to see if the issue, that tells you that the modulator is probably working fine. The ABS module is probably working fine, and that there's a wiring harness issue. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the hood opened up, and then we're going to unplug the main harness. That way we can check the cab harness. So now we're going to come back. Now that we have the harness on the firewall unplugged, which will show you a little bit later what we did there, we will now show you the pin test, the results of the pin test as we go through it again. If we get any kind of resistance in the cab, now if these don't all come back OL on the meter, we know that the issue's in the cab. If they come back all OL, we know that the issue is in the harness. So let's see what we got. So OL, 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 and again. And we'll just try this all the way through. And there is no change. So that means that there's no connectivity or crossover in the wires on the cab. So that tells us that there's an issue in the main wiring harness of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the camera out, and we're going to go show you where the main ABS harness is in this truck. Okay, so these two are the same style of connectors. This one right here is in fact the lower, well, obviously it's the lower one, but the lower one is in fact your ABS. This is more your main cab harness. So what you do is you might have to use a pair of water pump pliers. Some people call them channel locks, to twist this loose if it's been there for a while. So this one you can just unscrew it, comes out, and you can see the different pins there. And this goes directly into that cab harness we just tested. This is what this looks like. So from here on out, what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and we'll wind up removing this whole harness, and then getting a new harness and putting the harness in there. Now, some people will be like, oh, you should be able to just repair that harness. You could possibly repair the harness. However, the older the truck gets, you have to remember there's a lot of old wiring in there that may have become petroleum saturated from an oil leak, maybe a water leak. Could also have a couple of different spots where it's been kinked and ran that way for a lot of times. And with the changing of the seasons, the heat up and cool down of the truck, that wiring is going to become fatigued, and it's going to be harder and harder to get the repair to last. So I understand that whatever your budget can accommodate, is what you should do. Some things are more expensive on the front side than they are on the back side. It's also another thing of, if the truck's got to go because you got to deliver the load, I totally get it. But you should always go back and finalize that repair. These wiring harnesses, brand new, are about $3,000. Sometimes you'll see them as low as about $2,600, and sometimes they'll be as much as $5,000 depending on the model of the truck.
Also at the time of recording.
And the time of the recording. So this is in April of 2022. So if you're watching this, 6-8 months, a year down the road, God only knows what it can be with the way inflation and availability is right now. For all we know, it could be $20,000 just for the wiring harness, because things are just out of control as far as inflation goes and availability. The other thing is, there are a lot of different places that are not aftermarket, but are truck dismantlers that are selling used harnesses. The only thing about a used harness that I'll caution you with is you may in fact be paying roughly half or a quarter of new prices, which is still going to run you every bit of $900 or $1,500. You'll have no return on it, and you may be buying somebody else's problem, and you may be buying a harness that's as bad as your existing one, or possibly even worse. So let your conscience and your pocketbook be your guide when doing electronic repairs like this. But also remember that this is not only somebody else's life on the road that you're tampering with when you're doing work with the brake system, but it's also yours. So in the end, it's always safety first. And, you can't cheap out on safety. Or I should say, you shouldn't cheap out on safety, because we're talking about lives now. So above all else, consider what's at stake. That being said, when we get the harness in, we may or may not show you the removal and installation of the harness, because these harnesses, the ABS harnesses, all come as one thing. And they'll start, and as you can see, we've already done some other testing before we did film, and that's why you can see the bare exposed wires. We've already removed the insulation. Some of the diagnostics that we did was swapping the wiring harness front to right modulator, see if it will throw a different code that will code for the right modulator. It doesn't always comes back left. So because it always comes back left, that pin test that I showed you earlier confirmed it, but it always comes back left modulator, so you know it's in the wiring harness. Where the issue in this particular wiring harness is you can't see it. It's off camera. It's up in the frame rail. It may be that we get this out and then literally disassemble the wiring harness, looking for the bad spot in the harness at a later date when we get a chance. So thank you for joining us this time. If you like the video, give it a like, subscribe, feel free to share it, and thanks for joining us.